of the Cattle USA Daily podcast. Today, we are welcoming someone onto the podcast that many of you, if you've been following us on YouTube for a while, are very familiar with. John Campbell is joining us on the podcast today, and we are so excited to be able to interview him and talk to John about his life and just what brought him to where he is right now in his life. This last weekend, we had the honor of inducting him into the Cattle Marketing Hall of Fame, and then just getting his company at King of the Ring in Dodge City. And we're discussing all of those things today. And then just John's story, what brought John to where he is right now and the life that he is living. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this episode with John. John Campbell, welcome to the podcast. We are so excited to have you on and get to talk today about this last weekend on what we were all doing in Dodge City with King of the Ring. You were a Hall of Fame inductee, and it was a really, really great weekend. I would love to hear more your thoughts on it.
Well, it was just, we've had this gathering for a number of years now, and we have a video auction that we sold about 7,000 cattle on our High Plains internet video auction, and we kind of kicked that off Wednesday, and it's really a big week. It kind of coincides with Dodge City Days, so they've got a big rodeo going on, and I had a lot of people that traveled unbelievable amount of distance to get there, and besides the festivities that went on, Lauren, they were really excited about all the things there was to do in Dodge City, Kansas. They went to the rodeo, they went to the museum. I had one friend that comes from west here, about 200 miles. He took his boy to the car races. I didn't even know they had that. But so anyway, a lot of things going on this weekend, and it's great for really animal agriculture. It's great for livestock auctions and markets, and a big showcase sale, of course, at Winter Livestock. They offered right at 8,000 cattle live through the ring, and they had a meet and greet. Seems like that was on like a Wednesday night where we all got together at the museum at Dodge City. Really nice cocktails and hors d'oeuvres, and just real informal, and got to meet all of the other inductees. Every one of them was there, and could really sit down and visit with a lot of those people. So yeah, lots going on, and I was really honored to be a part of it, and it was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was an eventful weekend, that is for sure. I would like to first and foremost talk about being inducted into the Hall of Fame. How does that feel? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's pretty humbling, as I mentioned in my speech, to be grouped with people like a Ray or a Carl Winter that were just pioneers, and built markets from the ground up, and it's a wide spectrum of people, and not to leave anybody out, but you have Ralph Wade. I mean, he's just the undisputed best auctioneer there's ever been, and I don't think anybody would argue that fact. And he was there, and I've known Ralph for a number of years, and I just had a cassette of his that I just wore out when I was learning to auctioneer. I was kind of self-taught. I never went to a school, but just great people. Jackie Moore and of course Ellington Peak, and you've just got real pioneers. And here I am. I mean, I'm just ran an auction on hire. But I'm really honored to be part of such an elite group. Undeserving, probably.
Well, your acceptance speech, I will say, I think that one is going to go down in history. And for everyone that is listening to this that hasn't gone and looked at John's acceptance speech, I'm going to need you to hit pause and go do that real quick, and then come back and you can enjoy what we are talking about. I think you're the only person that could have gotten away with pulling out a bottle of whiskey and lighting a cigarette up in the reception hall of the casino, which phenomenal. It was great.
Well, thank you. You go to a lot of those, and you want to be sincere and you want to be genuine about receiving an award like that. But I think people like to be humored a little bit too, and you can kind of say some things that just exclusively the crowd can relate to, and I was trying to make a reference that, both my grandfathers were in the auction business and my dad was, and, the old timers, they were all hard cigarette smokers, and most all of them had a fifth or a pint or a quart or a handle of something in the bottom drawer. And so, just trying to make reference to that. That's about the only similarity in traits that I probably possessed with a lot of those guys. But I think everybody could relate to that, or for sure all the old school guys, and uh, I never have thought I'm old school, but I guess I am. So and I don't smoke, or I don't want to say I don't drink, but probably not on a regular basis like that they did 60, 70, 80 years ago. It was just more of a social norm then.
Yeah, 100%. It was a phenomenal acceptance speech, and darn it, you were the last one up there, and you got that crowd rocking and rolling again. Woke everybody up, and it was really great. It was phenomenal. I want to hear more about you and your story and what got you to where you are right now. You've had an amazing life and a life that brought you to being a part of the Hall of Fame, and I would love to hear just more about what brought you to where you are right now.
Well, yeah, it's been it's been really a great run for me. And of course, I can't thank Winter Livestock enough. They kind of took a virtually unknown, and elevated me to a level that I certainly wouldn't have been able to achieve without them. We have never had a crossword, never had a discussion of any time where there was ever any kind of a conflict. And I don't know if that's credit to me or credit to them, or just that maybe we complement one another, but they have always just kind of let me do what I do and kind of go unrestricted. And it helps when have the financing to do that kind of thing, but you end up taking, or I do, I take better care of Winter's money than I do my own. It's just, you hold that place in pretty high esteem when people grant you that much confidence. But I actually roll back 40 some. Jerry Kepler, who managed the firm before I got here, his son and I lived together in college at Colorado State University. So, besides the participation letter I got from junior college, I also did manage to eke out a degree from Colorado State. But really, that's how I got exposed to Winter Livestock. I had never heard of them. Of course, I grew up in the auction business. My grandfather Campbell had back in the 30s. I mean, they used to sell horses and mules, and he sold a lot of horses to the Army and mules to the Army, and really a colorful guy. But I always, this is kind of an offshoot, but I always appreciated those old auction guys because it was a big event, and everybody had their top coat on and their tie, and all of those guys carried a cane, and people that are around horses a lot, they all had a tape that come out of their cane, and they could measure how tall the horses were. And it would have been fun to live in that time frame, but it was of course not near the volume of money that we deal with now, but probably as a percentage wise, probably as much, if not a little bit more. But it was a business transaction, and everybody conducted it that way. And so that was kind of on my father's side of the pedigree. And then my mother's father order buyed a lot of cattle, and then he owned and operated an auction in Weld County, Colorado, in Greeley, Colorado. And there were two there at that time, Greeley producers, and then he owned and operated Weld County Livestock Commission Company. And that's really where I got my start. I say my start, but I was very, very young, just cleaning around the seats. And, you just kind of hang around and pick up trash, and I remember there was an old guy named Bud Zeiss, and after the sale, he'd always come and hand me a quarter, and you remember characters like that, and people that were involved, and how you came up. So I had some background that way. My uncle was he and my dad both rode horses at my grandpa's auction, rode them through the ring, and then eventually, why he started selling the sale there. And a lot of people that are in the paint horse breed will identify with Jack Campbell. He was one of the original board of directors of the American Paint Horse Association, and stood a lot of and promoted a lot of high-powered studs, and was a phenomenal pedigree guy, and sold the Pitzer sale, and I was trying to think, Benny Binion, of course, from Binion's Las Vegas fame. Why he sold horses for a sale for him, and so he was just a real colorful guy, and Lex and Sean Madden both credit him to getting them started auctioneering. Of course, they're both world champions, and I just kind of took some drill sheets that he had, and I just, like everybody else, you sell telephone poles going up and down the road and sell everything. I never went to school. I was kind of self-taught, and probably didn't learn how to do it right, and that's probably why I didn't last any longer than I did. But I really enjoyed it. But when you're trying to manage one and then sell the sale, and do all the other things associated with it, why it becomes a pretty big job. And I hired a young man by the name of Marty Neugebauer, and he's still with us and still sells our sale. But over the years, worked with a lot of the champions and stuff growing up. But anyway, that's how I got my exposure to winter livestock, really through Jerry Keffler's son. He and I lived together, and he kind of set it up, and that was 44 years ago, and I've been here ever since, I guess.
Yes. This last weekend, we were able to not only do the Hall of Fame induction, but then sit ringside and be a part of the King of the Ring and all of that. Can you share a little bit about how that felt to be able to sit there and listen to all them guys throughout the weekend and just watch that sale go on Saturday?
Yeah, it's pretty unique in that, of course, LMA has the world champion auctioneering contest every year, but it was really kind of Roger Emick who sold for us forever, and he sold here in La Junta for me a number of times. That was kind of his vision, was to, well, so many of those guys win the contest and then it's kind of over for them. You know what I mean? They've kind of reached that pinnacle of success, and he wanted to have a contest that would take the best of the best and have them compete. And it's kind of interesting, because you would have a lot of guys that would say, what the heck else do I have to prove? But winners sweeten the pot pretty good to where, and two, they still like to compete and they still like to sell, but it's just the ultimate, because you've got people that have already proven themselves and they're world champions, or they have placed, or they've got a pretty long list of credentials, all the guys that enter into that contest. And I don't know that any of them, I don't think they necessarily do it for the money. It's a nice deal, but boy, if you can, it has become a contest to where, boy, if you win that, you beat some pretty stiff competition. It wasn't just like the crowd that showed up that day. These guys have got a resume that's pretty significant, and if you manage to hold your own or win that one, you can really say that you've done something just by the structure of the contest. And nice to hear, you've got people from every place in the country, from California to, you hear their style, and you've got guys from the Southeast and you hear their style, and we're kind of accustomed to the Midwest, the Dakotas, Montana, Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, that kind of area in through there, and they all kind of sound the same. Well, that's not necessarily, that doesn't have to be the best. I think the boy that won it this year was from Michigan, and but to hear some of those Southeast guys and kind of compare notes with them, and a lot of them, selling 8,000 cattle live at one pop, that's pretty overwhelming for them. I don't mean that, but they're not going to get that exposure. I know when I started with winners, I was from northern Colorado, and the auction business was just not near as substantial, and that's not to take anything away from those guys. My family's operation would have been one of them. I mean, if you had 1,200, 1,400 cattle, it's a big deal. And you get down in, the at that time, the Amarillos, the Joplins, the Dodge Cities, the La Junta, Colorado. My gosh, I mean, those numbers turn into thousands upon thousands. Even here in La Junta in the 80s, when there was so many cattle, we had a sale at over 16,000 cattle at one sale. Well, that's a little different dynamic than if you've got 1,200 cattle to sell. So it was eye-opening for me. I mean, I grew up in the one where we'll sell the ducks and the bunnies, and then we might have 2 boxes of crayon books, and then we'd sell a few goats and pigs, and then we'd get into some cattle, and that was just what I grew up in. Cattle was our main deal, and horses was our main deal. But you get here in the Midwest, and the auction method of selling really substantial. So, but yeah, no, Kingering is nice. And if you've never been there, why, as you could make comment to it, really well done. And you get to see a lot of cattle and some big operators and big names. And I don't know if anywhere else you'd have an opportunity to rub elbows with, the Ellington Peaks and the Ralph Wades of the world. Everybody's always heard of them, but you can go to Dodge City and you can meet them, and they're very cordial, and all of them willing to talk and sit down and discuss things with you. So yeah, it's a neat experience.
Well, John, as we start to round out the podcast, do you have any final thoughts or comments that you'd like to leave with our audience this week?
Just to say thank you again. I couldn't believe the turnout on my behalf. I had people that had flown from Merced, California, from Washington State, from Joplin and the Dakotas and Texas, and it was overwhelming to me. And I just want each and every one of them to know that was very gratifying to me, to think that you have had an impact in somebody's life, that they would think enough to come to a deal like that, and you haven't even died yet. So it was great to see them all, and I'm very overwhelmed and appreciative of everybody that took the effort to come share that experience with me. Thank you.
Yes. Well, John, thank you for all the work that you have done, not only for the Winter family and on behalf of them, but also just on behalf of the cattle industry as a whole. It's wonderful to have you on, and thank you for your time today. To all of our listeners out there, make sure that you like, subscribe, rate, review, do all of the things. If you enjoyed this podcast with John, make sure you share it with a friend. Share it with someone who else might enjoy getting to hear a little bit more about John and his story. And as always, we will see you all tomorrow on another episode. Have a good one, y'all.